There's a hint of nostalgia every time I look at the compound bow. That's where the line was drawn in the sand. For it was never used again since 1.0. Perhaps it's because the players of today readily have better options. Or perhaps it was an intentional decision to make people forget the compound bow. A sinister scheme of grandest proportions, spanning years to plunge you in a despair you never knew existed. So how come Hoyoverse seemingly forgot about this weapon and in the process, abandoning a mechanic never to be seen in a bow again? To answer this, we need to go back in time. But nothing could have prepared us of the consequences of what we would uncover that night. 3 fateful years ago, there was a growing legend, not of swords drawn from stones, not in the age of gods nor monsters, but of arrows faster than lightning, stronger than any Kaenrian curse, leaving the 1.0 Genshin Impact player base to worship it in its wake. For whenever that sinister laugh echoes, his trusty friend bellows thy name. Amy-chan?
Me? Remember thou this, that I, fischl, am the Prinzessin der Verirrtelung, sovereign of the embarked.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube. It's your Slime King, the G-Man, and welcome to another video. In order to understand the disappearance of the compound bow, we rewound the clock to October 2020, 1.0, Genshin's inaugural banner. The compound bow is a 4-star craftable weapon from Mondstadt. At R5, it gives up to 32% attack and 9.2 attack speed, along with a main stat of physical damage. So, you're telling me that this bow wants a character that is primarily a physical carry, that normal attacks with a bow? You can see that until today, this still makes no sense. So what in the celestial compelled people to use this in 1.0? If you dig through some shallow graves from YouTube or Reddit, you can see that people were recommending the compound bow for physical fischl. And what in the goddamn world compelled people to agree to a consensus that physical fischl is the way to go? And did physical fischl actually work? It's probably hard to grasp what I'm saying now, since Xiox has probably released his 99th updated guide on the same character by now. The landscapes of Genshin 1.0 was vastly different to how they are now. It was a world where theory crafting had yet to properly take root. Content creators weren't fighting like petty teenagers, they were just wondering, why was D-Loop so good? Why was Razor the premier 4-star carry? WGS is crack? And to think 1.0 was the patch where we had Sincho apply Hydro on each sword of his burst with no ICD. And people were like, what's ICD? Events cost stamina, but few made videos to even protest about it. Truly, the age of chaos. However, there were 2 more things that helped marry compound bow to fischl. The only perceived good DPS bows at the time was Amos bow and Rust, which were both gotcha. And thus, the options can be trimmed down to the most accessible 4-star weapons, craftables, namely the prototype crescent and compound bow. Naturally, the former was ignored as it needed charge attacks to proc its passive, and the only character able to use it effectively was Amber, and no one wanted to use Amber, which put people's eyes on the compound bow, and the only viable character between Venti, Amber, and fischl, the bow characters at the time, was conveniently on the rate up in Venti's banner, and thus, everybody had a high likelihood of obtaining fischl. Real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, I implore you to like the video. Consider subscribing. It makes me happy. It makes you happy. The context and the motivations have been cleared, so we can actually get to the real question. Was this combination actually good? Yes. Kinda. If you were below AR-45, if you didn't have D-Luke, or Razor, which was almost everyone at the start of the game. You could bet on struggling to take down world bosses, let alone attempt Spiral Abyss. So, to have a physical DPS like that was kinda needed for how dumb we were. Think of a team with physical fischl right now as the centerpiece. It's probably even worse than that. Let's base a team from Usagi Sensei's tier list in Genshin Impact 1.0. Now this Sensei's tier list is absolutely trash, even today. But remember, we knew nothing at the goddamn time. Just look at this comment from that post. Fucking finally, somebody put Sinjo at the top. He is very good. I've been using him on my ult, and not only is he fun, he's busted. That's a great take, until he ends with this. Especially with Chi-Chi. This is the perfect representation of who we were. If you look closely at this tier list, it is divided into DPS, sub-DPS, and utility. The top being Diluc and Klee for DPS, Mona Sincho for sub-DPS, and Bennett and Chi-Chi for healer. So we can assume that a perfect team for a physical fischl, based on these rankings, would then be fischl, Chi-Chi, Venti, Mona. That team had to be shaved down, simply because you wouldn't expect the average player at the time to own 3 5-stars. So the most accessible team becomes fischl, Kaya, Bennett, Barbara. And if people had Chongyun, they would have never used balls based on Usagi Sensei's tier list. So, this was your average 1-month-old account's physical fischl. It's bad, but compared to the actual other options, it was less bad. Pyro Impact was a real thing then. Abyss 12 wanted you to have Pyro by virtue of the Pyro damage blessing. Vape had absurdly high damage, especially compared to Physical Fischl, which now makes more sense that Diluc and Klee are at the top of DPS lists. Lastly, there were barely any alternatives, because you couldn't reliably expect players to know who were good 4-stars, let alone actually get Beidou's, Sinchos, or higher constellation Shanglings that would have easily beaten a Diluc, by the way. On top of that, the burst-hungry units and our little understanding of energy recharge made playing these energy-reliant units a pain in the ass. On top of that, we did not have the artifacts nor the resources to actually put these characters to good use. I mean, running 4-piece berserkers can only get you so far, my G. So eventually, physical would meet its limits at AR-45 and above. It was a good time seeing fischl attack so fast, and that big, lovely white cheese of a number popping up. That didn't last. Ascending your world level from 5 to 6 was a big deal. You can farm 5-star artifacts now, and thus the game expects you to have these already just as you step into this new world. However, you need artifacts, but you can't clear artifact domains because you lack artifacts. And because you don't have artifacts, you can't kill world bosses to level up said characters so you can try to get better artifacts. The great AR-45 trap. This was where the truly good units separated themselves from the crop. Or at least, the units good enough at underinvestment, which was mostly 5-stars because of their inherently higher base stats. Suddenly, what physical fischl could handle, she was struggling against. Her mediocre single target damage, enhanced by berserkers, just could not keep up, and players quickly realized that this sucks. But there was a more insidious problem at play here, more than just a mere compound bow and fischl's tumultuous marriage. A growing stagnation that slowly poisons its mains, the inherent flaws of physical damage. Little did these physical carries know, but they would eventually hit a wall. Whether that would be at Spiral Abyss or a world boss encounter, the pain is all the same. At some point, you just stop dealing damage to clear, or in some cases, die. In a game based off of abusing elemental reactions, physical damage and Superconduct's physical shred just wasn't enough. Once people had access to better artifacts, and more importantly, better knowledge of the game, and how good amplifying reactions were, Compound Bow was quickly shoved aside, and fischl was put on a transformative, electro-charged pedestal, never looking back at its roots again. However, we were still in the infancy of Genshin. There was still hope. And that hope would quickly shatter. In 2021, they would release fischl's signature weapon, Mitternacht Waltz. This weapon was far superior than compound bow in every way because it allowed fischl an increase in physical attack damage while allowing Oz to deal damage as well. But as is with split scaling and hybrid builds, it still sucked. This was more than a year since launch, and we only had Eula to show for the physical element, a character more universally loved because of her ass than her performance in game. What gives? Not only did they seemingly give up on Compound Bow's core mechanic of attacking fast with physical damage, Hoyoverse had made no tangible effort to make physical great thus far. And thus, the cracks were deepening. A fast attacking physical carry should have been a no-brainer. Take a look at Eula's kit. The more normal attacks she weaved in during her burst, the higher the damage at the end. Song of Broken Pines gives attack speed, and its passive therefore theoretically increasing the amount of normal attacks Eula can perform. However, due to the nature of hit lag, especially in large hitting weapons like the Claymore, it had a negligible effect on getting more normal attacks. A few years later, Mika would be released, a physical support, adding yet another attack speed buff to the element. Using an optimal combo with all of these attack speed buffs would only net you 1 to 2 extra normal attacks under her burst. There were levels to this ish. Physical bow carry would have broken the game. Compound bow would have been the most broken craftable in the game. And Hoyoverse was scared they wouldn't be able to handle that kind of level. Imagine a Eula who was a physical bow character instead. Hit lag wouldn't be an issue, devoid of the flaw of needing to be on top of an enemy, a burst range that would be properly compensated because of the change in weapon type, attack speed buffs giving a huge boon, possibly providing insane damage, rivaling C6 Eula at C0. And then you realize there's levels to this ish. And Hoyoverse wanted none of that smoke. This ended up being bigger than all of us could have imagined. This wasn't merely about a 1.0 craftable weapon anymore. Hoyoverse has intentionally forgotten not only the compound bow, but the physical elements as a result, because they feared for the balance of their game. If they made Eula that strong, then this would have been a character that not only had the ass, the tsundere sass, but also the best DPS in class. That's too much power that can make Humors come in mass. Hoyoverse bamboozled us. I can maybe throw in Yunjin, Toma, Mika with fischl. Just get all the attack speed buffs I can. But it's not the same as doing it with a dedicated kit based off of physical and attack speed. Hoyoverse was a menacing weasel that has deprived us of a physical bow Eula and all of its potential. And that's why they ignored compound bow. So I doubt we will never see the fully realized potential, and that makes me sad. But it makes me wonder, do you know of any other mechanics Hoyoverse abandoned through these long, arduous 3 years? And who knows what truths we might unearth if we investigate further. Let me know in a comment down below. Thanks for watching.